All right, my clock shows 101, so let's go ahead and get started. So thank you everybody for joining today's live tour of Kion, our special edition on CMMC 2.0. So just to go ahead and get started, just quick introduction, myself, Randy Short here. I run what we call our delivery and support team here at Kion, helping customers get up and running with the platform from the very first time that they see it, all the way through implementation and onboarding, and really excited to chat with you all today. Just a quick overview and agenda of what we're going to be discussing today. So obviously, again, today's topic is CMMC. And so we're going to go through sort of the who it applies to, what it is, when it goes into effect, obviously how our platform Kion can help you with that. Ensure that we leave time for questions and answers or a Q&A session, and then talk about any next steps. Just from a housekeeping perspective, Zoom does have a Q&A feature. I will be monitoring that, and I've got some other folks here on the line from Kion as well that may chime in. So please feel free to use that, and we will make sure that we cover that as well. So jumping right into CMMC, so what is it, right? I know there's probably varying levels or degrees of understanding from the folks who joined us today. From maybe this is the first time that you've heard about it, or you're a CMMC expert. I think just starting off with what it is. First and foremost, really stands for the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. Say that 5 times fast. Which is a Department of Defense framework, really designed to protect the data, specifically the unclassed data from cyber attacks, right? And really, it applies to two major entities, which I think many folks on the line today represent. One is sort of organizations supporting the DoD, so many of your government contracting agencies, things like that, as well as our higher ed institutions, so those that are getting research grants or research data from DoD agencies, specifically in those three different areas, from federal contract information to CUI, controlled unclassed information, and covered defense information. So just at a high level, what this is, and again, for those that have been around this for a while, CMMC has had a very interesting journey. You may have been introduced to it back in, I think that was January of 2020, when CMMC Model 1 was initially sort of introduced, that they were moving to that. As you can see, it had sort of 5 levels to it. And since then, it's already evolved to a CMMC Model 2. And it's sort of not even really in effect yet, but you're all, again, ahead of the curve here, really trying to figure out, how you and your organizations can comply with this. So what changed, right? Out of the gate, you'll notice that it consolidated from sort of 5 levels down to 3. In level 1, the majority of the contractors associated with this will be allowed to actually self-assess. And so that will be obviously a much easier process for folks to go through. Level 2 is those that are sort of contractors with non-prioritized acquisitions. So those can still assess. However, those that are on prioritized acquisitions will actually still require a third-party assessment and a certification prior to the award there. And so that's going to be obviously really powerful to those, again, institutions that are looking to get access to those federal grants, or those contractors looking to, get access to particular federal contracts. And then level 3 is actually going to be an audit that's conducted by the government. For those that are following along, levels 1 and 2 have been really spelled out a lot more so far than what level 3 is at. If you actually visit the CMMC website, there's a big yellow bar to let you know that that's still sort of being assessed and formalized. And in every specification, solicitation that goes out, the DoD is actually going to specify what level you'll need to be to solicit bids against that, or again, apply for those grants. And so again, now it comes down to the when, right? So where we're at now is that CMMC is in a rulemaking process. As I mentioned, level 3 is still being built out, but we do know that when CMMC is fully vetted and does go into contracts, it will be a requirement, right? And so many organizations, including Kion, are helping you prepare for that time frame. Currently, it's looking as though this will begin showing up in contracts in 2025. However, it will be a pretty fast track. So once those contracts do begin to go out with it, all contracts will have to meet that later that year. So we would expect to see this fast tracked as things progress. So specifically, here's how Kion can help you get ready for CMMC 2.0 compliance. And I want to start off with just what is Kion, right? Many of you are potentially coming to us for the first time. First, welcome. Second, we are a software solution. So specifically, we are a multi-cloud enablement or governance software designed to give your organization visibility and control across sort of three main areas, from continuous compliance, where we're going to focus all of our effort today, as well as financial management and sort of that cloud ops or cloud operations and automation piece. Some of the differentiators with Kion is that we're really all about not just being a noisemaker, so not just telling you all the ways in which you're not compliant with something or out of budget, but actually going beyond that to take action, right? Limit that noise, prevent things from happening in the first place. In addition to that, we take security super seriously. One of the major differentiators of our platform is that we are not a SaaS solution, meaning that we actually install inside of your environment. Your data is yours, does not leave your institution or organization. And that really allows us to operate in everything from your commercial regions through to your GovCloud or Azure for Government, all the way up into your secret and top secret regions as well. And then you'll see in the demonstration today that we're really designed to be both that sort of command and control center for your technical users, but also that point of visibility or reporting for even those non-technical or more business-focused users inside of your environment. And so the main area that I want to focus today on the Kion functions, and again in sort of the lens of CMMC, is our continuous compliance module. And so again, there are a lot of tools on the market that do cloud compliance. A lot of those tools, however, sort of stick to what I'd say is the right side of this cycle. They do the detect and report. Again, they generate the noise and tell you what may be going wrong inside of your environment. Where Kion really focuses and differentiates is starting with that preventative side. And I'll show you in the platform this concept of a cloud rule. But the idea is that, if we are sort of from cradle to grave managing an account in accordance with CMMC, we can actually set you up out of the gate in minutes with a CMMC compliance account, then continuously monitor, detect, report, and ultimately, again, come back to that remediation to get you back into compliance if for some reason you are to drift. And so that's where we're going to spend a lot of our time today. So with that said, let me actually switch over and let's get into the live demonstration portion. As a reminder, I am monitoring the Q&A portal as well, or Q&A window here in Slack, or excuse me, in Zoom. So if you have any questions as we go along, or would like me to focus on another area, I can certainly do that. So again, you'll notice that right out of the gate, Kion is giving you sort of context across all of those different areas that we were discussing. But again, mainly focusing today's demonstration on our compliance area. We have this concept of a compliance score, which again is it's a weighted average essentially of the types of severities of the findings that we found inside of your environment. We have quick and easy access into the cloud environments themselves to grab access keys or even federate natively into the console. But where everything really comes together inside of Kion is this notion of an org chart. And so this org chart, you'll notice again, gives you the ability to control and observe across different lenses, from policy to spend to compliance again. But again, starting on the preventative side, this is where we have our policy view. So within Kion, we have this super powerful concept called a cloud rule. This is essentially where you're going to be setting up guardrails. So what maybe services are CMMC compliant, what regions you want to compute in. If you're using DoD data, you're very likely going to have a cloud rule like we see here, where we restrict folks and our users from using regions outside of the US. And we can make these cloud rules cloud agnostic. So today we support AWS, Azure, and Google, as I mentioned. We support that across multiple partitions, commercial, gov cloud, secret, top secret, et cetera. And of course, all the different regions that are associated with them as well. In addition to deploying those guardrails of regions, services, instance types, actions that users can take, this is also a way where we can deploy infrastructure automatically. So we can set up CloudTrail and GuardDuty and config. We can deploy, all of your Azure logging stacks, et cetera. And we're using all of the native solutions from cloud providers. So things like CloudFormation templates, Azure Resource Management templates, right? Kicking off webhooks into other CI/CD pipelines, or even invoking Terraform. All of that power comes from these cloud rules. When we apply a cloud rule to our organization, however, we see that begins to inherit their way down, right? And here we see that when I get into the research and development side, this is where I house my grants. I've actually inherited this baseline that my organization has set across my entire cloud estate. But I've also actually included additional cloud rules, like in this case, CMMC 2.0 compliance, where I want to go and I want to report on how I'm doing against CMMC. And I'll show you that here in a second. When this org chart continues on down, you can add on additional compliance frameworks, right? Maybe when we get into biomedical here, we're actually getting into other things like HIPAA or a very specific type of account configuration. And that gets us sort of all the way down from this area where we're grouping things together using this concept of an org chart, or sorry, of an OU, all the way down to an individual project where we're actually attaching our cloud accounts themselves, right? And so this is an example of in this case, an environment that is that has a dev, prod, staging, and tools account all associated with it. And so when we look at these cloud rules and I dig in a little bit further, right? Let's look at what Kion gives you out of the box. So all these cloud rules are designed to be extended or completely custom written by our users. But what Kion does to make things really easily, especially in terms of a particular compliance framework, is actually aligns a whole cloud rule associated with these. And so we see that we had our CMMC 1, when CMMC 2 released, we added that in as well. And we see that we've got a number of different cloud rules that come out of the box. Everything from sort of this holistic one that encompasses that entire security lifecycle, from prevention all the way through detection, reporting, and remediation. We have one that's used should there be an incident. You have an EC2 compromise or an Azure VM compromise that goes in and actually sort of protects that account for an incident response, takes off all access to the internet, snapshots everything that's in there. And then we have one that's, again, if you just want to start with understanding where am I in accordance with CMMC compliance, one that's essentially just doing that detection and reporting as well in here. When we look at the particular cloud rule, what actually we're giving you inside of Kion. First, we're giving you, again, those prevents, right? So that ability to set up a CMMC compliant VPC, making sure flow logs are on, right? To enabling encryption, setting up GuardDuty, putting in all of your auditing rules, right? We're also then pairing that with an IAM, with a bunch of IAM policies to ensure that now that all that's set up, your users can't break that down or change that really good posture that you've got in place. Same thing on the Azure side, right? We're giving you a bunch of policy definitions, ARM templates, setting up your logging and alerts, your network detection, security, looking at all those different policies that you don't want somebody to change, and those role definitions as well. And then again, pairing that with a compliance standard here that has, in this case, when we look, 368 individual checks associated with CMMC 2.0. And in addition to all of these sort of great policies, which we're going to dig into here in a second, we actually give you the full security controls matrix that goes through, starting at a high level, how exactly Kion is leveraging things like inheriting controls from the CSPs themselves, right? So the CSPs are giving us physical access control, right, to the data. So how leveraging CSPs, how leveraging just the Kion platform and the way it's designed, plus these Jumpstart assets, help you to actually get to a certain amount of coverage across all these different level one and level two, which have been defined so far within here, right? And so when I look at CMMC level one, again, a lot of this is still on the self attestation side. Level two is where you could bring in those third party assessors. But what we do is we actually outline exactly what the framework says. So CMMC, level one, AC L1 3.1.1 says you have to have authorized users, et cetera. Um, Kion is then giving you all of these Jumpstart resources to make sure that you do have authorized users, right? We need to make sure that CloudTrail's on, so we're looking at everything. We need to make sure that you don't have IAM roles that haven't been used in 3 months, or allow all statements, things like that. Same exact thing for Azure, right? How we're actually helping you meet those, as well as example responses that you can put in your SSPs, your security plans, or your grant applications for how exactly you are meeting CMMC level one or level two, or when level three's guidance is out, we'll update that as well. All of the documentation that you would need for that. And so we can see here actually that this particular CMMC standard has been deployed out across my environment. And we can see that of this, I have 121 checks that have gone out, 35 of which are 100% compliant. None of the areas that fell within biomedical research have had any issues. Those that had, 7 of those have been high severity, 61 medium, 18 low, et cetera. And ultimately, those checks led to about 3,200 findings out in the environment, right? And we can see we can see that broken down by different projects in Kion or even different accounts that are within here. So when I'm, let's say, an account owner, right, this is my production environment. This is being governed by CMMC. If I want to look at that same data in a different way, this is something where I can say, okay, this project inside of Kion is actually made up of a number of accounts from AWS to Azure to Google. And within here, it's being governed by many things, one of which is the CMMC framework here. And so I can see that of the I can't remember if I said 1,600 or 3,200 findings that existed there. 632 of them are actually on this account or this project that I'm looking at. And so as a user or as a security practitioner, I can now come in and see exactly what's going on, right? So I can see that as recently as just an hour ago at this point, I have a number of compliance findings that are coming back across a number of different regions, right? I see I've got, in this case, VPCs with flow logs disabled. I've got a CloudTrail log bucket that's not logging. I don't have MFA enabled, et cetera, right? I can see on a check by check basis the resource that's the problem. So in this case, the specific trail in CloudTrail that is not meeting this particular issue, or sorry, this particular check. And from that, I have a few things that I can do about that, right? First and foremost, I can go in and ideally resolve that, set up CloudTrail integration to CloudWatch if I want. I also can go in and I can suppress that. So in this case, maybe this is the default trail outside of the US. And I want to basically accept this risk, right? I want to suppress that. I also can do that for a period of time. And one of the things that I also have inside of Kion is actually the ability for my users to request a suppression. So go through an approval process whereby the end users that are responsible for the actual application are not the ones that are necessarily have the power to accept a security risk on behalf of your security team. However, they are the ones that are most closely aligned to the actual workload and really understand, why they need to suppress that, for example. Other things that we have, for example, though, are the ability to actually automatically remediate based on a finding. So again, on that full sort of security lifecycle, we've looked at the prevention side in these cloud rules. We've looked at how we're detecting that. So in this case, like we're looking for S3 buckets that don't have public block enabled. In this case, we see here that we've given you this policy to look for S3. We're checking for public block. If it's not enabled, we're telling Kion, so we're reporting it. And then we're also giving you this ability where just by simply uncommenting line 26, we would actually set remediation for you automatically. So in this case, we'd find an S3 bucket, we'd log it in Kion, we'd tell you when we found it, we'd fix it, and then we scan again. We're going to say, hey, this S3 bucket is no longer has public block. enabled or disabled, I should say, and sort of automatically resolve that finding as well for you. And so I'm able to look at this at every level, from sort of how I'm doing across my entire environment. So again, that 30,000 foot view of what my compliance looks like across everything, across all the standards that I have. I can then drill down into the particular standards themselves. So if I do have to do things like CIS and NIST and CMMC, right, I can see that as well. I can break this down by one application or one account, or I can also break it down by just one control. I want to see all of the S3 buckets that don't have public block enabled and where I found them across all those different regions as well. So we're giving you sort of that entire holistic picture of what to do about that. In addition to how we're looking at different resources out there and aligning to whether or not they're compliant with a particular framework, one of the things that I mentioned when I was going into the CMMC cloud rules, right, was that IAM policy bit. Where that is really important is Kion not only manages again your account and your infrastructure. Kion is what we often call like the front door to the cloud, right? This is the idea that Kion installs inside of your environment. It's branded. Its URL is kion.company.com or whatever. Ties into your identity provider, your SSO, because obviously one of the reasons that you get out of compliance is when your users have more provision than what they, or excuse me, more access than what they should inside of the cloud accounts. And so when I log in my case, using a developer inside of my environment, Isabella Infrastructure, for example, in this case, and we log in, first and foremost, we're getting her permissions of what she can do inside of the app and what she can do and what she can see in here, right? So we can actually see that that's like locking out different things inside of the org chart. But what this also does is actually applies to what she can and can't do inside of the cloud providers. So we'll notice I logged into Kion. From Kion, I clicked that button and got right into my AWS accounts, right? I could get right into my Google Cloud subscription, right into, or excuse me, my Google Cloud projects, right into my Azure subscriptions. And from here, all of those preventative controls are in place to govern what a user can do. So again, right, CMMC is ensuring that I'm computing inside of the US. CMMC has EC2 as an approved service. When I try to go outside of those guardrails, again, Kion is putting that in place to say, hey, you've just tried to go into Canada. We're going to block that access before that ever happens. And so, again, going back to that security lifecycle, putting those preventative controls in place are extremely powerful to ensure that you never even have those findings show up on the other side of why you might or might not be compliant going forward. So with that, I want to switch back, make sure I leave some time here for Q&A, and just talk about some next steps. So with CMMC, the first step that you're going to want to figure out is assessing where you're at, right? So as I mentioned, level 1 and level 2 have been published already. Granted, they could still change. They're not in their finalized state until they've been sort of locked in. But that level 1 is a self-assessment, right? So you could already start understanding where you are, where you might be falling short. And I think it's really important to also look back at sort of the lineage of CMMC. Again, it came from that NIST 800-171 framework that's been around for years. And so even if you already might know where you're at on 171 or 172, those are really great places to be at this point in time, knowing that you might be, 12 to 15 months out from sort of looking at, real CMMC 2.0 compliance. Obviously, Kion would love to be a tool to help you with that. So one of the ways in which we do that, so I showed you that CMMC compliance framework. We actually offer a 30-day guided evaluation, completely free, installs the app inside of your environment. You work with folks like myself and those from my team to bring in accounts. And typically what we do in that first day, right, is figure out what accounts you want to assess and immediately set up those CMMC compliance checks to just go out in an assessment style. Just go out and bring those findings back, tell you how far you are from CMMC compliance, and then help you work toward a plan to get compliant. And then obviously the next thing is, if you are trying to get into some of those prioritized bids, those prioritized contracts where you are going to need higher level certification like level 2 and ultimately level 3, third-party assessors, government assessors are going to be very busy, right? Everybody is going to want those CMMC assessments and certifications as soon as possible. And so if you could begin addressing this now, have things that you can show to auditors of what you've already been doing and what you've been working on, that is hugely powerful, will be a great step toward addressing that. So with that, I'll take any questions that folks have. I know we've only got a couple minutes here. I'm happy to address anything on just the things we've talked about today, or if you have broader questions about Kion, happy to do that as well. And so I will monitor the chat, monitor the Q&A pods, and see if anybody has anything here. Looks like we've got a couple questions coming in. I'll give folks a couple seconds here to add some more. Perfect. So the first one that I see in here is actually about Kion as a platform, and around our sort of multi-cloud ability. So specifically, the question is, do I need a Kion for every cloud provider if I have a multi-cloud environment? So within Kion, you only need one installation across your entire environment, whether that's multiple different AWS management accounts and organizations, or you are actually using multiple different cloud providers, so AWS, Azure, and Google. Sort of only need one Kion to rule them all. So typically, folks will install inside of AWS in the environment. Just that ends up being where their sort of most mature cloud workloads often live, and so they install alongside that. But yes, you only need one Kion installed out there. So thanks for that question. Any other questions that anybody has for us today here? All right, let me just check the chat really quickly. All right. Well, looks like we've answered everything for today. So again, thank you so much for attending today. For those that maybe weren't able to make it live and watch the recording, nice to meet you. Please feel free to reach out with any questions, anything else that you may have, any other questions that come to mind later. And we'll be in touch soon. So hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Thursday, and thank you for joining us.